I'm Ken Carlson, the mayor this year, so I want to welcome you all. I see familiar faces. We've been here for 3 days, and I just want to share with you my gratitude for being here. I real quick want to introduce, we have what's called the General Plan Advisory Committee, which is composed of myself and Councilmember Nowak, as well as Planning Commissioner Alan Vinson, and then we have one other from the Planning Commission, as well as one from the Architectural Review Commission. And over the course of this, so far, up to this point, we've had several GPAC meetings with some of the different commissions from the city, so the Commission on Aging, our Education Commission, our Civic Action Commission. We held a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So we've got a lot of things going on. One of the things I missed, and I really should have said this on Thursday when we were together, but we have a little more of you here. We're celebrating 58 years of incorporation here in Pleasant Hill. So this is really kind of an opportune time as we look back, but then look forward to the next 20 years of Pleasant Hill. We have a tremendous team of experts and consultants here that have helped walk us through this. So I hope you've not only found this enlightening, but a lot of fun too. I've learned a lot from all of you as we've participated in the exercises here and gone over and chatted about all the different aspects of a general plan. So I'm really, really excited to see how this is all going to wash out today. And I'm going to turn it over to Rick from our team.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. Welcome. For many of you, welcome back. And for others of you that are here, glad to see our room is full. We were wondering if how big a room we'd have today, and we're glad to see that we're at capacity pretty much for today. I am Rick Rust. I'm with a company called Mintier Harnish. We're general plan experts, if you will. That's what we've been doing for the last 35 years in about 60 cities around the state. Brent in the back there is the project manager. I'm the director for the overall project. And we're in charge of the overall compilation of the general plan and the final products that get done. But to do that, we have to have a number of experts to help us along the way. Today in the back, so we have Doug, who's with Applied Development Economics. They do fiscal, financial, and economic development components. Ellen over here is with Baron Pierce, and they're doing traffic and circulation for the plan. Della in the back is with Rincon, and Rincon does all the things environmental. They'll be eventually doing the environmental impact report, but are helping write some of the natural resource and environmental components of the general plan itself. Did I miss anybody back there? I don't think so. All right, and then I'm gonna let WRT, who's our community design group that's helping us with this, and many of you met with them in the side room over the last day and a half, and they're gonna be talking about some of the sites that were looked at and what are some of the ideas. Now, somebody asked me, were we going to have the final solution this afternoon? The answer is no. As we said before, and the mayor mentioned, we're your technical experts. This isn't for us to develop a plan. It's for us to lay out all the ideas we've heard, to give you some of the pros and cons of going certain ways based on what has happened in other places and other attempts to do things, and give you some other ideas that might work to solve some of the issues that you've all brought up. So in doing that, although we've had a great crowd over the last 3 days, and if you didn't know, we started on Thursday and went through most of the day on Friday and then today, we're also going to be putting this workshop basically online. So if one of your friends or neighbors wasn't able to get down here in the next 3 days, they'll be able to go online and try this. Now, probably look towards the end of next week for it all to be up online and running, and we will notify everybody that's been on our mailing list. And if you were in the back and signed up, we'll add you to the list there, or if you haven't signed up, feel free. There is a website for the project, one of these cards in the back if you want to remember it, but pleasanthill2040.com. On the website, there's a little button on the right side that lets you sign up for the mailing list, or the email list, if you will. So if you have friends or neighbors, or if yourself you haven't signed up, click on that button, type your email address, and you'll be automatically enlisted to be part of our team. And you'll get information about upcoming events, as well as when there's documents available for review. So again, this isn't the end today. What we're going to be talking about are some broad ideas that have been generated and some things that are being looked at, but nothing's out of the question at this point. We're still open for suggestions. We're still looking for your input. And we're open till 4:30, so if we happen to finish a little early, we'll go from there. Now in today's presentation, we'd like to get through the whole thing. You may have noticed a couple cameras here. We are filming this, and it will be available on the city's website after they've put it all together, which will take a few days to compile. Is that about right? Yeah, about that. And they'll have copies of our PowerPoint slides as well as our voices on there, so your friends and neighbors can follow along with that. But since we are recording it, we need to get your questions online. So we're going to try to go through the whole presentation. We'd like to. And then if there's questions from the audience, we'll take those at that point and repeat them so that they're on the video so everybody can hear them at home and enjoy your questions too. Now, somebody asks, what are we doing? Why are we doing this thing? A general plan is the long-term framework for where the community is going. It's the policy guide. It doesn't have all the answers, but it is the guiding document. So everything else the city does, whether it be zoning or building permits, these all have to be consistent with the direction provided in the general plan. Now, a general plan has some distinguishing characteristics. One is it's a long-term plan. That is, it goes out for 20 years. So that's why, coincidentally, we're talking about this being the 2040 general plan. The plan will be adopted towards the end of next year, which gets us right in that nice 20-year frame. It's also comprehensive in nature. And if you looked at the posters earlier today on the side wall from the existing conditions and trends, you see the broad range of things that are talked about. Many people think of a general plan, they think of what is the color of the lot next to me? Was that low density residential or high density residential or commercial? It's more than just that. The whole activity about how we guide our future is more than just the colors on a map. And so we cover everything from circulation and mobility to environmental resources and open space, parks and recreation, etc. And the interesting thing about this is you start going through this, everything has trade-offs. We can't optimize any one solution without having an effect on some other solution. So if we take away all the cars in the community, we're going to have other issues as far as our transportation capabilities. So we have to watch for that kind of balance, and we're going to help guide you through as we make these selections going forward long term. The other thing about the general plan is general in nature, so we're not getting into the specifics on any one topic, but we want to make sure we cover the broad range and provide the good policy guidance for where we're going. Now today, we have our existing conditions and trends posters. These will be on the online workshops. You'll be able to flip through those as well. This is based on the existing conditions and trends workbook, which is on the website under the library. So if you'd like to download that and find more, all of these pictures plus other supporting text is available on that document. As far as we have up here, we talked about in our presentation before, we've done a number of outreach events, both online as well as the off-the-grid events and some of the concerts out here in front of the City Hall. And from that, we got inputs from about 150 different individuals. Now, we said these are our top 10. Many people ask us, well, I don't know if that's quite right or not quite online. What I did want to make sure we understand is that none of the 150 got thrown away. We don't just boil them down and get rid of everything else. So we keep track of all the comments we have, because sometimes an individual's thoughts on that one topic could be the difference that makes a change in the community. So we want to make sure that we look at everything you give us and make use of that as best we can. What we're doing here today is trying to get some sense from the overall community about what are some of the top issues. Doesn't mean that the one with only a few dots or one dot goes away. It's something we'll have to consider, but kind of gives us an idea of the flavor where we're going. We also had an exercise on the side here, which was looking at a visual preference survey. And that was just looking at different types of architecture and street treatments and infrastructure components. And we got your inputs as far as the salmon-colored dots for things that you thought didn't fit in Pleasant Hill. The green things were items that you felt were matching the character of what you'd like Pleasant Hill to look like in the future. And again, these will be up at the end of the presentation, so you can go through those a little bit again. With that, we're going to turn this over to WRT, again, our community design sub-consultant, and many of you got to meet with them over the last several days. They're going to talk to you about what we've heard and what we're looking into. And again, these ideas will be available on the website for your friends and neighbors to comment and add to as we go forward. So this is Jim with WRT, and he's going to lead you through and introduce his team.
Great, thank you, Rick. My name is Jim Stickley. I'm a principal with WRT. We have offices in San Francisco and Philadelphia, and we are a planning and design firm, and really happy to be here. I want to introduce the rest of my team. In the back is Poonam Narkar, who is urban designer and project manager for this project for WRT. Diksha Rawat, who is our project urban designer. Peter Winch, who's our project planner. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for being here. This is a great turnout, and we're super excited about this project. We've been here for 3 days, having a lot of fun, and really developing lots of ideas and concepts, as Rick said. And I want to thank everyone for not only being here, but I see a lot of faces of folks that have been here once or more times during the last 3 days, and we have gotten some really valuable feedback on a whole range of topics, from creeks to infill development to parking issues, and all really helpful to us as we generate ideas for the various what we're calling focus areas around the general plan area. So I wanted to just explain a little bit of our methodology. As Rick said, this is a work in progress. What we're trying to do is get some ideas on the table and then get some feedback on those ideas. And so the last 3 days has been all about that. We've already kind of started sifting through and eliminating certain things, but it's a very dynamic process. And so we look forward to hearing further feedback on the various concepts that we're going to be talking about. Our charge, if you just go back one slide, specifically is to look at what we're calling these focus areas. So DVC College area on the north, the Mangini property at the intersection of Taylor and Pleasant Hill Road. And we're actually not looking exclusively at the Mangini property, but the zone around that intersection as what we're calling a neighborhood center. Downtown, the industrial area off of Hookson, Contra Costa Boulevard as a corridor, and different sort of characters as you move up and down the corridor. Gregory Lane, Taylor Boulevard, and Oak Park Boulevard. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've focused into certain specific places in each of those. But that was our charge. You know, we are here to help figure out what is appropriate for the future in areas that are susceptible to a certain level of change. So a place like downtown is constantly changing. There are uses going, uses coming. And so these are the ones identified as those areas that might have some potential change in the future, and how do we plan for that, essentially, is our role. Next slide. So the way we like to think about the community in order to kind of frame all of these ideas is, how do you all like to live as a community? You know, what do you do? What do you need? How do you like to get places? You know, what's in your daily routine, but also what are those special things you might want to go and do on a Thursday night or on a weekend? What events do you like to go to? And then how do you just like to live within your neighborhood environment? So how do you like to live, and then what is the ideal environment that accommodates that way of living? And I think that's kind of where we're coming from. And so the way we think of it is, from a whole community scale, what is sort of a framework that allows you to live in that way that you desire. And so we started building this framework with first the natural systems, so creeks and the green spaces and the trails, as sort of the basic framework that sort of helps guide a lot of things. And then the next layer, on top of the natural systems, what are the main arterials, collectors, and thoroughfares going through the town that you use in different ways? Some streets you're using as a through street, other streets are more localized, slower traffic, lower capacity, and what is that network, and how do you want each of those streets to perform for you, not only when you're in your car, but also when you might decide to walk or ride a bike or scooter or whatever. So what is that street framework, and how does that need to function to best accommodate your way of living? The next layer then is these opportunity zones, and those are the ones I named: Diablo Valley College, Mangini, downtown, the industrial zone, and Oak Park. And then we also looked at this sort of network of what we call either neighborhood centers or town centers. So there's something that works out pretty nicely in that And on the Oak Park commercial area here, the little zone here on Gregory Lane and Pleasant Hill Road, a little commercial zone here catty-cornered from Mangini at Taylor and Pleasant Hill Road. The one here at Taylor and, I can never remember, Morello, thank you, is another little node. And all of those are very kind of small scale, little, almost neighborhood village centers. And they've got a small amount of retail. They're very convenient, and they just happen to fall within a quarter to half mile from any neighborhood. So you can see these overlapping circles. So they're nicely spaced and well used from what we understand. And so we think that's an important part of daily life is, can you get to those easily? Do those have the things you need in them, et cetera? And then there's a couple that are much larger scale commercial and retail destinations up here on North Contra Costa Boulevard and down here in downtown. And those have a different function. You know, those have more serious stores, bigger groceries. So when you have things that go beyond your day-to-day needs, the gallon of milk, you just want to go get a bite to eat, a cup of coffee, but you want to do something that is you know, a larger need, then those are the centers that you go to. And those have a certain way that you want to get there, and they have a certain way that they want to function within them. And one of the things that we're very interested in is, you know, the programming that happens in those areas. Events, festivals, concerts, and things like that, and where are those kinds of things appropriate? How are those working now? And how could they be accommodated better in the future? I'm going to talk a little bit more of that in a couple of the specific areas. So that's a framework that helps us think about how the community is functioning, and it really informs our approach to what we do in each of these little focus areas. So we're going to move, I think, right into, yeah, so I don't know, do you want to touch on some of the, well, one of the things that's been very valuable, and Peter maybe can touch on this a little bit, is all the feedback that we've been getting throughout the 3 days. Rick mentioned the DOT exercises, a lot of conversations, and there are certain themes that are coming up time and again, and that's been really helpful for us.
This might become a little bit of a back and forth where I handle these text-heavy slides, but the point of this is it's sort of an encapsulation, I think, of what Jim has tried to communicate about the community framework. And we're seeing this as maybe a sort of guiding set of policies that could go into the general plan in one form or another, that describe how we see the community values being projected onto the landscape. So one being to restore the creek corridors and provide public access wherever that's feasible. Certainly we're seeing a lot of desire for that in the issues and opportunities feedback we're getting here. And a lot of opportunity when we look on the ground at these beautiful creek corridors. Creating a balanced circulation network for all modes of travel. I think that, you know, Pleasant Hill, actually more than most places, has pretty great auto access. There are a lot of streets that move really smoothly. There's the framework for a good bike and ped access with several sort of lengthy multi-use trails, and there's an opportunity to improve that. And particularly to improve the experience, I think, along some of the corridors. A desire to reinforce downtown as the heart of the community. The opportunity to nurture these walkable neighborhood centers that Jim was talking about. Enhancing the identity of each of the 3 civic cores. That's not something that got a lot of attention so far, and we may not continue to emphasize it, but it was a little element of what we talked about. And then supporting the distinct identity of each neighborhood.
I'm struck by the concentration of dots as Peter goes through those points, but just to touch on a couple of those: lack of open space and recreation, environmental concerns over climate change, homelessness is a big concern, connectivity of bike and pedestrian facilities, lack of urban and walkable districts on the issues side. And on the opportunities side, restoration of creeks, riparian corridors, and open spaces. Quite an impressive collection of dots on that. Attracting non-chain businesses, we heard a lot about this. encourage more regional collaboration. So some really kind of strong direction for our team. So the downtown, very interesting area. I think what we talked a lot about here was access and connectivity and function, more so than a lot of major infill opportunities. This is a downtown that is built, it is operational, there's a lot of things about it that are arguably working well, but it could be improved. And so we heard a lot about better choices, maybe more variety of eating establishments and shopping. There could certainly be some improvement to those things. You can work with the landowner and the operators to recruit certain types of businesses, and that's a process that can play out over time. It also serves as a gateway to the city. Most people are coming from the south, and they come right through this area. And so it really is the gateway to Pleasant Hill in many regards, and there are some issues with that. You're presented with a lot of blank facades. The streetscape is okay, but it could be much better. So maybe there's some opportunities there. And then enhanced connectivity. Can people actually walk to the downtown from these surrounding neighborhoods? You've obviously got a big barrier on this side with the freeway, but is there a feeling of easy connection between City Hall and downtown and vice versa, and then back out to the park? There's actually a creek corridor that runs adjacent to the park. Is that something that can be accessed and be part of the downtown loop, for example? And then what is the continuity of downtown as it goes northward? The fabric falls apart a little bit. Perhaps as you go north, you have some more dated, strip shopping centers and things like that. So how could that be sort of brought up to the times? And then we talked a lot about just programming of events, activities. There's a certain number of things that happen downtown now. They're quite successful, but could there be more? Can we build a more robust program of events, and then how could those events be accommodated in different ways? Maybe they're different sized events and so forth. And the next slide, it's just an illustration that sort of tries to put all that together. So Contra Costa Boulevard, the gateway coming from the south, going by Crescent Loop, which comes through here, the connection from Crescent Loop to City Hall, and then beyond to the park. Some of the events now are happening around City Hall. Are there maybe opportunities for overflow zones in the parking lots to expand events? Is there a stronger connection down to Crescent? Could Crescent be used more? Could it be utilized better for events? Could you block off that segment of Crescent more often and house events? And so is there a whole zone of sort of public use that you could identify that could expand and contract depending on different things that are happening downtown? So we thought a lot about that. I think those were the main points on that one. And on the next slide, and then I think, as I said, as you go north, then things start coming unraveled a little bit, and part of that is due to people own their lots, their businesses, and their land free and clear. They're doing fine. The businesses are viable. They certainly encourage small local businesses, which is a good thing. It's the non-chains. So those are all good things, but they aren't maybe functioning as well as they could. Some of them have exposed parking that's right on Contra Costa Boulevard. The storefronts are set way back off the road, so it doesn't really encourage pedestrian movement. They are sort of designed as car-oriented, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. Oftentimes they are accessed by car, so that needs to work too. And then the lot sizes and depths are very irregular as you go up there. So we just started to look at, if you were to encourage redevelopment on those kinds of parcels, what are the different prototypes of land use that might work? Could you just redevelop it as a retail, but that is pulled up to the street edge and puts parking behind, or maybe parking in the center and occupying the corners with storefronts that push up to the street? Or could you do mixed use there? Could you introduce another land use over the retail, like office or residential? And is there space to accommodate that on these lot sizes? So I think those are some questions of what fits, but also what's appropriate. What would the community like to see there? So we're testing those. I think this is just showing, what if you can just simply anchor the corners, have retail on the prominent corner, very visible, a desirable sidewalk environment, and then a couple of levels of either commercial or residential above that. And is there, on certain lot sizes, is there enough space to accommodate all the parking behind that? So just starting to test some of those ideas.
As this applies to the general plan, this might be a set of policies that might include supporting the concentration of diverse businesses downtown, and making, trying to focus on retaining and attracting unique non-chain businesses or restaurants. The opportunity to enhance the public space and the connection between this public space that we've been watching for the last 3 days as we've been working in here, and downtown, which is just so close, but not quite connected enough. And then also connecting through to Pleasant Hill Park and seeing if that can function more successfully as kind of a civic, and sort of an extension of that civic space. And as Jim was talking about, and this comes into the third bullet here, thinking about taking a stronger role in programming and programming diverse events that communicate broadly to this community, bringing new energy into the programming downtown, thinking about how that could fit into different amounts of public space. Focusing on enhancing the identity of the town along Contra Costa Boulevard through a variety of streetscape improvements, facade improvements, public art, trees, and so on, and then improving connectivity across Contra Costa so that downtown, which a lot of people think of as the crescent only, maybe in the longer term could begin to extend, that character could begin to extend to the east across Contra Costa Boulevard. We also identified some sort of choices. These were not as clear. These might be seen as things that need a little bit more input. And that mostly pertains to that east side of Contra Costa Boulevard. Do we want to just think of that in the long term as, big convenience commercial? Or would this be an appropriate place to transition to a higher intensity mix of office and mixed use residential, or hotel and office and residential? What is the right combination of those kinds of uses that might be good to help support the vitality of the crescent side of downtown and give Pleasant Hill just more of an identity, probably more of a tax base and everything else. So those are some things that I think require maybe a little more input.
And then moving to the next area, so this is what we're calling College Park. This is the area north in the North City, near Diablo Valley College. And there's a lot of opportunities here, a lot of interesting things going on. The relationship to the college is one thing. The relationship to a significant part of the creek that goes through. It's quite a wide corridor. There are some paths developed on segments, and other segments are not developed yet. We think that is an undiscovered gem in this part of the city, and you could actually imagine that a lot of the things going on around it, not so much in established residential areas like down here, but particularly up in here where CarMax is, where there's a new project proposed across from the university, and these parcels here next to Contra Costa Boulevard, you could easily imagine those uses sort of turning towards the creek and taking more advantage of that. And there could be some kind of a more developed town center with the creek as its focus, and that's pretty exciting for us. to think about that. So it's really quite underutilized. It's sort of hidden back there, but when you start to tromp around back there, there's a lot of beautiful mature heritage oak trees. The corridor is quite wide, as I said, so there's room to do paths maybe on both sides and things like that. So definitely something to take advantage of. Sorry, just going back once, Peter, that was my signal. I'm taking too long on that slide. And by the way, Poonam promised to interject if I miss things here, so I'm still waiting for that to happen. So I think, yeah, I mentioned most of these points, so Peter was right in changing the slide before. How's everybody doing tonight? All right, great. So this is just an illustration of what I tried to explain. So a real opportunity to connect to the college transit station. They had the right idea there. It seems like it's pretty underutilized. It could be utilized for more than just the college, perhaps. This new project going in here across from the college could really activate Golf Club Road, but it could also have a side that turns towards the little park with really nice oak trees in it, and that could be sort of the gateway point to a developed creek corridor that snakes around Carmax. Maybe there's a chance to kind of flip some of these uses so that they face that. You could even see a little sort of public zone back there that has cafes and Creekside Walk and things like that. You could still have uses that face Contra Costa Boulevard. I think there's room in some of these parcels to do both. So you could still hold your street edge there and have that be a very nice activated edge. And then that creek path could just continue on around. This portion has a path that's functioning now. It looks really nice and used, I think. So just connecting that all the way through to the university, the college rather. And this is just a little close-up of that area. So the creek trail connection. One idea, sorry, just flipping back one, is could Carmax maybe give up a couple little corners there to do a little retail pod, again, to sort of make a little gateway as you come into this area across the creek and have those uses face the creek. So lots of really interesting things you could do there. And then forward again. So yeah, this just shows different ways that you could hold your edge on Contra Costa Boulevard, do a couple of things that are facing the creek, and then still have parking in the interior for convenience. But all this is connected together. And that's just a little view from the Golf Club Road Bridge, looking back up there, and you can see one of the uses on the right facing the creek, and happy cyclers and pedestrians along there. And then now we're moving on to this what we're calling the Mangini Area, but it's really a focus on the intersection of Taylor and Pleasant Hill. And again, we think this is an opportunity for a more developed neighborhood center. So a center that the surrounding neighborhoods can easily walk to if they want, and get the sort of everyday needs if they want to go out for dinner or get a gallon of milk. The district Parks and Rec owns this corner, and they are contemplating different options for how to redevelop that property. Currently it's a daycare center, but the building is quite outdated. So they're looking at a number of options for what might replace that, and I think we'll probably would want feedback on what was needed, from the residents that live in these surrounding neighborhoods. So that really starts to make a nice little pod of uses when you put it together with the commercial uses. I think there's a Chinese restaurant here and maybe an aerobic studio and some other things happening there. There's some more retail on the other side of Pleasant Hill, and put that with a little Parks and Rec facility at the corner. That starts to make a nice little destination. And then with regard to Mangini, we don't know what they're going to do. It's a privately owned parcel. It's currently zoned R10. There is a creek tributary that goes through that property, so we think it would be really nice to capture that, maybe put a some sort of easement perhaps that can allow that creek to go through. That might become part of an open space network that connects back towards Grayson Creek, which goes through here and connects to the Contra Costa Trail, the Canal Trail. It would be nice for these neighborhoods to have through access to the Rec and Park facility, not necessarily through access to the road, but maybe it's a pedestrian connection. So I think those are some things to think about when and if there's a proposal to redevelop that property. And yeah, this is just an illustration of that. So this is looking sort of to the south. So you see Pleasant Hill Road going down here. You can imagine a little redeveloped facility here for Rec and Park. The existing retail catty corner over here, and then a little bit across the street on Pleasant Hill. Certainly making safe crosswalks and better quality sidewalks along Pleasant Hill Road so that people can easily get down from their neighborhoods and circulate to the park. And perhaps if this creek connection could be made to be able to have a little loop where they could go for recreation. And then Taylor is a real workhorse in terms of the traffic flows. That's not a bad thing. It's very efficient. We talked about some ideas of making that a parkway. So just making it maybe more beautiful, better tree canopy. There may be room in the right-of-way to do some pedestrian paths that don't necessarily have to adhere to the street curb. So that could be a different kind of character along Taylor, and so there's some interesting ideas there. Okay, so this is a really interesting little area on Oak Park Boulevard. It's a little, what we're calling a neighborhood center. There's a little retail node there. Quite lively businesses doing pretty well and fairly popular with residents. There are some issues related to parking and service, where maybe some of the service areas are outdated a little bit. So maybe just a little bit of of improvement needed there. But overall, it seems to be a very nicely functioning neighborhood center. There's going to be a new library down the road at the end of Oak Park Boulevard, and that will have some recreational fields associated with it, and it starts to make a pretty nice little complex here with the middle school of a recreation destination, plus the library, which is going to have a whole variety of different community-oriented uses. It's a very impressive proposal. And so how do we get all that connected to each other safely? Have Oak Park so that it has good sidewalks, it feels safe, and then possibly connecting to some of the creek trails over here on the East Bay Mud right of way. There's certainly an opportunity to connect into that from the library and the new park. And then down here, perhaps there's another Rec and Park facility, the old schoolhouse. That could be another anchor depending on what they decide to do there, and they're probably looking for feedback on that. There are these really nice civic anchors on each end of Oak Park, and then the little neighborhood center in the middle. So there's a lot of really nice opportunities just to sort of make all that function as best as it can. This is just an illustration of that. So this is the neighborhood center retail here in the center, and then going down Oak Park to the new library, and you can see this recreational complex, the tie to the East Bay Mud Trail here. This is actually a creek that runs through the neighborhood. I believe it's called Murderer's Creek. We don't know why, but and a lot of it is in people's backyards, so it's not really an opportunity for access, but it might be an opportunity for just the enhancement of of the ecological function. So just trying to recognize those creeks wherever they exist and tie that into the fabric of these little centers.
I think that we looked at neighborhood centers not so much as places where there's going to be a lot of land use change necessarily or development, but places that need to be knit together more successfully so that they feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to that corner and there's a cafe there and there's a daycare or there's a library or whatever the precise combination of attractions are there that make it feel like a neighborhood. So yeah, ensure that each of the neighborhoods have good sidewalks and bike access, just kind of a basic accessibility thing, that they allow for a mix of local serving businesses, that there are kind of good rules of play that make sure that those businesses and their operations are compatible with the neighbors, and that we looked only specifically at the Mangini site because it's the only sort of relatively undeveloped site in Pleasant Hill of that size, that any future housing, like Jim was saying, preserves that riparian corridor and an access maybe corresponding with that corridor that connects to the neighborhood center. So yeah, so related to that site, right now we understand it to be have a low density single family land use designation, and we wanted to recognize the opportunity or the potential for that to be a little bit more flexible so that there could maybe be clustered housing, townhouses maybe, that would be combined with some preserved open space, that there could be a good combination of providing more housing choice and providing more open space in the community.
So some more options to consider as we go forward on these areas.
The civic cores, Jim was talking about the library. I think that we are anticipating that to be a pretty cool new civic anchor, and that makes 3 for Pleasant Hill, because there's downtown and City Hall, there's the community center sort of in the north, and then there's the library in the south. So the opportunity to kind of give each one of these a more distinct character and identity, and they each have their components. That one, there could be a nice civic opportunity, a civic space opportunity along Oak Hill Boulevard, kind of at that corner, anchoring that end of Oak Park Boulevard. And then for the other one, my experience was that the community center doesn't really have a presence on Taylor Road. That it's really the back, the front door is on the back side, and you drive around, and it feels very private. Instead of feeling very community oriented, it feels to me very private. So I felt like there was more of an opportunity to have more of a civic presence and create a more park-like experience in the front as well. So major streets, Jim talked a lot about the need for sidewalks and bike accessibility, reinforcing the trail system and the creek system. Pleasant Hill Boulevard, we understand, is right now having some pretty significant streetscape improvements that are adding bike facilities and sidewalks, and I think that's hopefully going to set a good model. Oak Park might be a good opportunity, and Gregory Lane seemed like another good opportunity. I think there needs to be some traffic analysis done to make sure that that would work, but we observed very narrow sidewalks and perhaps more lanes or wider lanes than necessary, so some opportunities there. Taylor Road, like Jim was saying, could be more of a regional facility, like a parkway, which might actually imply some nice landscape treatments and even a trail. And then with Contra Costa Boulevard, how can we support a diverse business mix there, kind of nurture it, and also accommodate land use change, and over time maybe some more mix of uses, and for the businesses that are there, to provide a more attractive street presence, but without necessarily resulting in the turnover of those businesses. And continuing to invest in the pedestrian realm and the transit experience on Contra Costa Boulevard. And then some choices here. Oh, this is, right back here we have these preference surveys, these visual preference surveys. Just wanted to call attention to some of those characteristics that might be appropriate on a street the scale of Gregory, or a street, maybe this would be an example of something that's more like Contra Costa Boulevard, where because of the scale of the street, it kind of implies the need for a more generous pedestrian realm as well, to give that feeling of safety and buffering. Yeah.
Also, there's a couple of these that have stormwater management done in pretty creative ways, so I think that's also a thing to note on. Yeah, this is maybe a little more urban, but gives a sense of what a really bike-protected street would look like.
Just a nice cafe sidewalk experience that might be typical of a neighborhood center. So,
bike lanes.
yeah, I think the green dots, we like that sense of safety that communicates. Then some choices with the major streets. Is there the space, and do we have the sort of appetite to look for bigger changes on Contra Costa Boulevard that would create more space for bikes? Maybe that kind of a protected bikeway that we just saw with that really safe environment, or do we really need to rely on the secondary network of multi-use paths? Another question with Contra Costa Boulevard is, to what degree does the community want to support some transition to accommodate a greater mix of housing and some transition away from the commercial environment that right now is pretty prevalent, but even now also has some areas where residential neighborhoods sort of have their backs directly to Contra Costa Boulevard? Is there a model for some multifamily residential or mixed use to actually front on Contra Costa Boulevard, but be buffered enough to create a good living environment? And again, some development prototypes that I think are relevant for those conditions, and which we got a lot of feedback on from you in the last couple of days. That kind of a scale of building type might be a good fit for a corridor for Contra Costa Boulevard, not for something like Oak Park. And that has a more overt corner street presence. That's another building form. This is actually from Lafayette, I believe, so there might be some familiarity there.
Top two levels are actually set back a little bit. It's called a step back, so that tends to help with the scale. And I believe those are all office uses above retail for that building. And then, this is understandable. There's a lot of small single-family neighborhoods, and this preference here with the green dots indicates that people are comfortable with that.
Yeah, so with multi-use trails, just the opportunity to expand them, and I think the next step would be to create more amenities along them. Benches, kiosks, some wayfinding, some informational, interpretive signs, some ways to help people understand that hydrological system, which is there but almost invisible. Maybe water fountains, just those kind of things that make the experience better. And then opportunities, I think there's a really engaged community here, so opportunities for more partnership between the city and the operators of the trails and community groups to do restoration work. And then we also heard a bit about connecting across 680. None of our focus areas, ultimately, that we spent a lot of time on were across 680, but we definitely did hear about connections to BART, connections to Veranda, how to better bridge 680, which right now is such a barrier in this town. So I think certainly there's the opportunity to make Oak Park Boulevard's crossing of 680 a good, safe, multi-use bike and ped and car crossing, because it's got good access to the BART station. It doesn't carry high volumes of vehicles, and so it's good for those reasons. There may be other opportunities. Taylor Road, a lot of cyclists who actually bike depend on it, but it's actually pretty unsafe. So some basic safety improvements, I think, are necessary there. And then as in terms of choices, maybe there are some bigger ideas, like a new ped bike access that could connect that College Park hub that Jim was talking about across to Concord. Or perhaps some ideas for some new form of high-capacity, high-frequency transit along Contra Costa Boulevard that would ease that connection to BART.
So this was some of our input just very late in the game. There was a very young participant that saw we were extremely busy back there, and she really wanted to help out, and so she did her best to just add to our drawings, and we really appreciate her input.
As we said, these are based on some ideas we heard, some things we're going to look at. Sometimes we need to challenge the status quo and see what else might be out there, and to look at what the possibilities are and what the ramifications of those choices are. I stand in the back of the room in a while and I'm watching the audience, and sometimes it was like this, and then there's a couple people going, no. And I know what some of those no's were about. So we've talked to a lot of you, and that's part, we give this high-level presentation, but we've also had some discussion about, well, I like the funky old commercial centers, and we don't need to fix them. So we understand all of that, and appreciate having the time to talk one-on-one with several of you about some of your insights.